welcome to finStream, a new streaming channel that will focus exclusively on personal finance with videos, podcasts, and articles that will help you manage your money, no matter your age, no matter your gender, no matter your race. Hi, I'm Bob Powell, one of the founders of finStream, as well as the editor of the Streets Retirement Daily. Our new streaming channel plans to produce original programs like the show you're about to watch, which we call Your Life, Your Money. Plus, finStream will be curating and posting the best personal finance content available so that you don't have to go hunting and searching for articles and videos and podcasts that will help you achieve your financial goals. Think of finStream as your one-stop shop for all things money.
That's right, Bob. And I'm Pam Krueger. I'm the founder of Wealth Ramp and the co-host of Friends Talk Money. It's a podcast on PBS. Now on finStream, you're going to meet top experts on everything money, from designing your personal financial plan to understanding debt, to funding college tuitions, to planning for retirement, and everything in between. finStream offers invaluable and objective information and knowledge that can help you start putting everything to use right now. And by the way, we're not just about experts talking to each other. It's about nationally known experts willing to share their wisdom directly with you.
So we're launching finStream during unprecedented times, and that's intentional because we believe these times demand a new resource such as finStream. Why so? Well, many existing media outlets focus on business news first and personal finance as an afterthought. finStream will put personal finance first. On this new channel, we'll tackle the issues that impact your money and your life in this pandemic economy. Everything is changing, from our jobs to our family relationships to our finances and a myriad of other aspects of our lives.
And in addition to our unique positioning, we're also a channel that pays attention to women and the specific issues that affect us, because we are an underserved audience when it comes to money. So finStream will become the go-to where women can find valuable advice. And our whole point is to simplify complicated money and career issues. Think of us as your trusted home where you can come for personal finance advice in an inclusive environment. Welcome to our very first show, Your Life, Your Money. Now, we know that this pandemic has already changed the way that we're living and the way we're working, and likely how we'll manage and invest our money. Now, we can't actually see the future, and we can't know what life is going to do in terms of change, but going forward, it will help to get some clarity around it. We are so pleased that you're going to meet an all-star panel of guest experts today.
Joining us today are Michelle Singeltary, who writes the award-winning column, The Color of Money, for the Washington Post, and is the author of 3 books, including her most recent, The 21-Day Financial Fast. Maddy Dychtwald, the co-founder of AgeWave, and author of several books, including her latest, Influence: How Women's Soaring Economic Power Will Transform Our World for the Better. And I should mention, she's working on a new book called Ageless Aging: Take Charge of Your Future. And lastly, but not least, Dominic Endicott, a venture capitalist and partner in 4Gen Ventures, a new age tech fund. Michelle, let's start with you. We're living in the most extraordinary times. Millions of people are unemployed. Many have come to realize that their emergency funds are inadequate, and others are raiding their retirement accounts. So what advice do you have for those trying to get a handle on their money today, and what steps they can take to rebuild after this financial crisis is over?
So when I talk to people, I sort of put them in different categories. But the first thing I say is that because so many people are unemployed or they have a disruption in their income, you have to basically triage your financial life right now. So if you've ever been to a hospital where there's been lots of people coming in and not staff, you might come in with a twisted ankle. And then, shortly after, someone comes in and they take them before you. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute, I've been here. But when they triage patients, they take the most critical patients first. So a heart attack trumps your, sprained ankle. And the same thing with your finances. So if you've lost your job, then you only pay what you absolutely have to pay: the roof over your head, food on the table. And that may mean that your credit card bills don't get paid. I'm not saying that you shouldn't call your lender to try to get a break, but you can only do but so much. And you should be okay with that, given the circumstances.
Your advice is crystal clear that it's all about just surviving. Don't pay anything that you don't have to pay. Now, I want to ask a couple of the other panelists what they think. Maddy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is a really important conversation, and it's part of a bigger conversation. In a study we did last year, we found that talking about money, that women were more likely and more comfortable talking about their own death than talking about money. So in this time, when we're home with family and we're trying to really bond with each other, it's a great time to open up the conversation about money, including debt, including credit scores, and also figure out how can we learn more about finances.
I would add two additional angles. One angle is around work, because obviously managing your cost side is one way to sort of deal with today's crisis. The other way is to find new sources of revenue. And we're really at the beginning of this massive wave where suddenly work has become remote. And that means a lot more people can find potentially other sources of income. So I think sort of thinking about new sources of income and how do you align for those jobs and what are they looking for is a new skill, but that's another area of opportunity. And I think the other piece is around restructuring your core assets. Many people are potentially in an opportunity to actually take a look at where they're living and see if they can live in a place that's cheaper. And that's probably something that wasn't an option a year ago.
In our program here, we're encouraging viewers to submit questions to pose to our experts. And my email inbox is usually filled with all kinds of questions from readers, I'm sure like they are with you, Michelle. And I want to read one to you and have you respond to it. I think it's sort of atypical of these times. So I'll read it. I retired 1 year ago with $1 million in a 2020 target date fund. I had no plans to draw on it for quite some time, if ever. This is a very scary world to me right now, though, and I want to pull it out and just move it to all cash. Bad idea? I don't want to lose all I have. I've worked hard for all my life for this, and any advice would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been hearing that from a lot of people. People are so scared and they're thinking, my mattress is looking pretty safe right now. But like I like to joke, if you're going to do that, give me your address. I got some people. You can't be in a panic. And here's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say don't be scared. I'm not even going to say don't panic, but don't make moves based on that fear. The fact is, once you retire, you're likely to still live in retirement for another 20 to 30 years. And your money is going to need to grow to at least keep pace with inflation. If you move it to cash, that won't happen, because right now the banks are paying with the Fed rate is so low, practically zero. You're not going to get any growth on that money in the bank. And so the things that you need to buy in the future, food, housing, clothes, things like that, if your money doesn't keep pace with inflation, you will be behind. So hopefully, this person is going to sit down with someone to map out, okay, once the market stabilizes, because you don't want to necessarily move things now anyway, because you're going to lock in any losses that your portfolio might have right now. So you're going to work through a plan to say, okay, I need this amount of money for the next, I would say probably 2 years while we kind of stabilize. So that would mean a combination of any fixed income, Social Security, pension, savings. And then if you feel like you may have to pull from that portfolio, and then the rest of it is invested for the long term. You might have some for 5 to 10 years and then longer. But cash is not the place to go completely, for the simple fact that it won't keep pace with inflation.
So I want to take a moment to talk about the lighter side of your life and your money. Pam and I, we always want to find out what people are really doing right now. So we've been scouring the internet, searching for some of the imaginative ways in which people are saving money or maximizing their dollars during this difficult time.
And here's one we found on Circular Threads. It's a picture of a handbag that this woman made from plastic grocery bags. That's right, during the pandemic. Remember, you couldn't bring your own bags in. So this woman found a super creative way to recycle her bags, and notice the practical carrying case. This one handbag, by the way, used 500 plastic bags, and it took her, Bob, 9 hours to put that together.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily how I want to spend 9 hours of my life, but I do have like 500 single-use bags in my pantry. And because I can't bring them to any recycling centers right now, maybe I'll donate them to her.
You know what? Makes me proud to call myself a bag lady. So let's now focus on how we spend our waking hours, which is working. Now, the whole concept of how we work is changing before our eyes. I mean, Dominic, you've coined the phrase flex workforce. It's a whole new type of workforce that's emerged during COVID-19. So I'm going to ask you to explain that.
Well, I think it's useful to look at what's happening behind the scenes during the COVID pause. And one thing that's happening is that every company is rapidly reinventing themselves, and they're accelerating automation processes that maybe they were planning to get to by, say, 2023, 2024. They're doing them in 2020. And that's going to have a huge impact on how work is going to evolve. And to many people, it's going to be very scary. A lot of white-collar jobs are going to go, as well as the blue-collar ones that have been hit immediately by the COVID effect directly. But at the same time, there's a huge opportunity. What you're seeing is companies like Twitter and Facebook and MasterCard increasingly are saying, you can work from anywhere, and you can work in a way that allows you to have a more flexible life. So you can actually combine taking care of your children, taking care of your parents, with working, as long as you get the job done. So I think it's going to be scary, but at the same time, it's going to be a time of great opportunity. And part of it is, how do you sort of handle this new normal? And one way to sort of think about it is really to step back and say, 200 years ago, you saw the move from the farm to the factory. That was because of automation of farming. And then about 100 years ago, people went from the factory to the office. And really, this is kind of that size, right? It's the next big shift in work, and it's uncomfortable, it's scary, but it also offers huge potential.
So, Maddy, obviously, you're a bit of a futurist yourself, and AgeWave has built its reputation on looking ahead to the future. Do you see the same patterns here or something different?
Well, I see the patterns, and I think that Dominic is right in terms of the acceleration of the trends that was in place already. So, yeah, that's a given. But I don't see it as being all that great. I mean, yeah, there's some really positive things about it, especially for companies who can give up their rent on their commercial space and such. But let's take a woman. Let's take a woman who has 3 kids at home, and let's say she's a lawyer. She's working at home, trying to get meals on the table, trying to organize her house, and trying to keep her job, and trying to do a great job so that she can get, as Dominic suggested, get those promotions in the future, maybe get a little bit of a raise so that she can actually afford this lifestyle. So I don't see it as being like this all amazing, wonderful thing. It's complicated, and I think a lot of the burden falls on women.
Oh, I think that's such a good point. I think the responsibility of this whole pandemic, meaning that the responsibilities that come financially, especially, really fall more on us now than ever. We have to take control of our own situations, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think that does raise a lot of complications. Michelle?
Well, I think we have to be careful about uplifting this trend, because it's still going to leave behind a lot of people, minorities in particular, who often have jobs where you can't do it at home because they're heavily concentrated in the service industry. Clearly, you can't serve people their dinner from your dinner table. And so, when we talk about this trend, we really are talking about higher paid workers, middle income workers, people oftentimes with degrees and things like that. If there are other jobs like her customer service representatives and things that companies can put in place where people can work at home, it might work for them. But I think that the trend is really going to be skewed towards higher income workers.
I think these are all very genuine issues. Some of the research I've seen would suggest that parents of children under 12 have been most negatively impacted, whereas parents of older children or that are out of the home have actually been able to adapt better. So I think that's true. I think having to handle young families has been very, very difficult.
What I've seen, I have lots of friends who have teenage kids. They're ready to pull their hair out. They're trying to figure out how am I going to deal with my son not being able to graduate and not even sure he's going to college next year? I mean, the psychological, the mental health issues are very real there. I think that grown-ups, 20-somethings, my daughter, who is 33 years old, moved home for a period of time because it was the best thing for her to do. And so that we went back to some patterns of high school. And I'll tell you something, I didn't love those patterns.
Oh,
I hope
dear.
she's doing the dishes now, at least.
Are you kidding?
What about laundry?
I think that when we talk about flexible work schedules and working at home, I think we need to broaden that definition. So we need to talk about, okay, the ability of people who can, and whatever jobs they have, to work from home. It saves you a lot of money, it saves you a lot of stress, the commute. There's all the issues about boundaries, but we'll just set that to the side. And then when we talk about flexible work schedules, well, people who can't work at home, what I think we should be more willing to do is that people can have hours that are different than 9 to 5, that they can, maybe split their shifts so that they're home when their children get home from school, if their kids are being schooled at home because they're online. So that maybe workers who can, work late at night and in the morning. I mean, everybody, I think the corporations and companies have to be flexible in how people work and where they work and when they come to work. And then, we got to talk about the childcare issue. It is hard to work from home when you have little people. They see you here. My dog just busts through my door, into my office. A lot of distractions. And so we talk about that. And to Maddy's point about the college, I'm less worried about this not ability to, have traditional graduations or even be on campus. I actually think it's good, because far too many people have spent far too much money under this guise that my kid has to live on campus or have this certain college experience that has cost a great deal of money and makes them take out student loan debt. Right now, about half of the cost of going to college is not to tuition and fees. It's actually room and board, which is food and rent. And we're borrowing for
Really good. It's a great plan.
Renter to borrow for their rent, and yet we are saying it's okay for students to borrow for their rent and food. So
it's crazy. I agree.
It's a bit striking, though, Michelle. I mean, I might suggest that, right? The need to go to college is so that you could enter a flex workforce job, right? And to not have that college degree, right, is to put yourself at a disadvantage as much as it is to have student loan debt, right? I mean, they're almost equally bad in some respects.
But if I could offer, I think you could see some new models where you could do 2 years of community college, maybe combined with some branded stuff that allows you to get broader experiences that you can get there, and start flex work while you're still at college, living at home, save all that money, and end up without debt, right? I think we need to be thinking about this time to really examine every single model, how work works, how college works, all aspects of education, and to think about the opportunities. And I don't deny that I think this is going to be very painful. What I'm trying to do is think about, well, as painful as it is, what is the new path? I mean, how do you reinvent your life in this new world?
It's not as straightforward as you might think. I mean, on paper, it sounds like a panacea to be working at home. But I know that there's a lot of people in my company, for instance, working at home. They miss the social connection. They feel socially isolated. And the effect that has on your mental health and your well-being is dramatic. So I think there's a whole side of this that we're not exploring. It's not just a financial issue. And by the way, the mental health issue becomes a financial issue.
We have to stop and evaluate what the fallout is from that, both the positives and the negatives, but it's definitely here and it's happening faster than we ever expected. So let's take a look at the lighter side of this pandemic. So Bob and I have been scouring the internet, searching for some funny and maybe imaginative ways to use your home office space. And we found this picture on insider.com. This is a therapist who has repurposed her shower to make a workspace and maybe get some privacy at the same time.
So, Pam, I thought I had a short commute, but I think this woman, takes the pride on commute time.
But, you got to remember, she's the therapist. So where's the couch going to go?
So now I'd like to discuss something that, Maddy, you've described as ageless aging, which is something that will help you take control of your future, your health, your finances, work life, social life, etc. Tell us a little bit more about ageless aging.
So one of the big stories of our time is that we are really at the beginning stages of a longevity revolution. When we started Age Wave more than 30 years ago, we started as a trend. And we said, oh, that's an interesting trend. We're going to see lots of people living longer, and hopefully we can help them live better. But what's happened along the way is I've become part of the trend. I have aged also. And what has become, for better or worse, that's what's going on. And it's happening for all of us. So what I've begun to realize is that ageless aging is the way I want to do this aging thing. Now, let me explain what I mean. First of all, I don't want to be defined by a number. I mean, chronology, it's just something we made up. It's a way to measure how many years we've lived, not what kind of health and well-being we have, what our finances look like, what our relationships look like. So that's one thing. Second thing, there are some great things about aging, fabulous things. As we get older, our wisdom hopefully grows. We get all kinds of experiences and we gain perspective on life. And that's a good thing and something we should share with the other generations. And we should embrace those sides of aging. But there's some really negative things that happen with aging also. And that is that we see some body changes and we see some mental health changes sometimes, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. And we also see some brain changes. And we don't want, I mean, the biggest fear of all people over the age of 50 is, am I going to get cognitive decline or Alzheimer's disease? 70 is not old anymore. 80, 90, these are the years we're going to have to live to. And we've got to get our financial house in order and our health house in order. And those two things are very intertwined.
And we sort of think about aging as the other end of the spectrum, older folks. But let's talk about the ages aging for 20, 30, and 40-year-olds. Like you talked about your daughter coming back home, and we have had this thing where if someone is a young adult, they have to be out on their own and they've got to have their apartment, and that they're irresponsible if they live at their house. And then we have all these jokes about men and women living at home at their 30, and that's ageless aging too, because not everybody can afford to be on their own. If you've got, I'm looking at your bookcase, I suggest that you probably have a nice size home and probably plenty of room for your daughter to be there, maybe her if she's married and kids. And I know we do here, and we are actually encouraging our young adults when they finish college to come home and live not just a couple of years, but 5 to 6 years, save almost all of their salary. And so if they did that, because we're not going to charge them rent and we are providing food, they could save probably 90 to 95% of their salary after taxes. When they're ready to launch, they would actually have enough to buy their home outright. And that would allow them to age without a lot of that burden of
Pressure
debt and expenses. And so
stress.
let's talk about it, the whole spectrum of the age, and let's get rid of a lot of these things that we've been saying to people to measure whether or not they are financial success.
It's almost like, guys, what's new is old again. I remember my parents when they first got married. They could not afford their own place. Where did they live? They lived with their parents, and they stayed there until they could afford to buy a home. And so what's old is new again. It's interesting.
There's also some other benefits to that. The social interaction is fantastic. Learning from different generations. A lot of older people don't know how to do Zoom, and yet they want to relate to their friends and maybe family that live far apart. Their younger children can teach them how to do that. And older adults can teach their kids how to do things which they've always done. So, I mean, just continuing on in that way. But there's a lot of cross-fertilization that I think is really, really healthy.
We think that aging is too important to focus on the old. Aging is for everybody. And really, it's at those intersection points when you see the magic of young and old and different generations coming together, where you see how the potential. And I also think the word retirement, for example, is such a downer. It's like, we're done with you. We don't need you anymore. I think we should give people permission, even if they have enough financial assets, to say, why stop now? Maybe your best years are still ahead of you, and really empower everybody at any age to always push for the highest purpose of what they can achieve. And that's a really new way of thinking.
We have gotten to these phrases and these terms like helicopter parenting as a negative thing. So that basically we're saying is at a certain age, don't tell them anything. But we still have a lot to impart on these young adults. And so I've got young adults in my household, and there's obviously boundaries, and you got to figure out how to do it. But there are some things that we can help guide them and maybe help them not make some of the mistakes, especially when you're African American and a minority. You know, letting my kids fall is not the same as maybe letting some of your kids fall. So I can't stand back and let them fall, because they're going to fall a lot further than somebody else's. And so when people say that to me, I just want to slap them, because I'm going to help my kid do what I need to do. And if that means, if you can tell me whatever, you can call me a helicopter, I don't care, because I'm going to zoom around my kids and make sure that they're successful, because they're already behind the line because of systemic racism and discrimination, which is real. We now see it. We've captured it on camera. And so if somebody else says that to me once again, I may be arrested because I may slap them.
Actually, Michelle, could you follow up on that? And when you think about ageless aging and the effect on Black Americans, Brown Americans, and their aging that is occurring for that population is different.
Well, there's a lot of differences. You know, we have more health challenges. And so if we have more health challenges and we don't have access to affordable health care when we age older, the costs are more. And we know that the pandemic has hit our community a lot harder because we have a lot of underlying conditions. And then so right away, people are like, well, it's your fault. Well, let's just look at what happened to African Americans and just how our bodies developed over time from being enslaved. We had the worst food given to us, and that was what we cooked. And we continue to cook. That's all we knew. And so it takes generations to change that thought of what we ate, because it's just ingrained in us, because it was forced on us. And so if we have higher blood pressure, diabetes, and things like that, that is part of the systemic racism that took place. And we have to acknowledge that. There's like a domino effect when it comes to these things.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Important that, you know, the rules that are in place for regular families, like maybe white families, don't necessarily apply to us. Again, you still need to have to learn boundaries. You got to let them grow. But when we're talking about all these issues, you have to put it in context. And only in my lifetime have discrimination laws against housing and where I could live have been off the books. They're still practiced, but off the books in terms of being legal.
I can't agree with you more with the domino effect. It's like you just don't appreciate until you stop and appreciate how many things touch everything else in someone's life and over the generations, and how that has an impact on everything, let alone, you know, where we are today and what we see in our society today. Michelle, I think you just brought up a couple of really, really important points. Thank you.
What we put in our bodies, the food that we eat, it transforms who we are. I mean, over a 7-year period, it really does. We keep using the word reinventing, but it reinvents the body. And do you think there's a way to take the information that we now know about nutrition? No, it's confusing, but if there were a clear message and bring it to the Black community, that they would embrace it?
Well, first of all, you have to make sure that there are grocery stores in our community where they can buy that great food. So we know that there's food deserts are real. So what that means is that we don't have as many grocery stores. We don't have Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or places where, farmer markets. We don't have those kinds of things. And so it's not just a message, but you also have to follow it with an ability for people to actually get the things, healthcare centers and things like that, where they may have some nutritional classes and all those kinds of things. They're not in our communities. They're not taught. It's not there. So oftentimes people are like, oh, we just need to tell them how to eat better. Well, okay, where am I going to buy that food?
Yeah, that is such a good point.
And I need a job that will allow me to buy that food, because it's much cheaper to buy a can of Spam than to buy some healthy chicken breast, and oftentimes, which isn't in the store, that doesn't exist.
Exactly. All right. Michelle, Maddy, Dominic, ageless aging. I mean, we just opened a Pandora's box. It's something that it's obviously something that we're thinking about at every stage and every age in life. What are your key takeaways?
Well, I've been steeping myself in this for a really long time, for more than 30 years. And I've always known that there's like socioeconomic differences, but I never drilled down into it to see the impact of the racial discrimination and how the Black community is impacted by this racial discrimination, and even being able to age in a better way. And that, thank you. I mean, I feel like I just learned such an important thing that I hope to be able to integrate into my book. So, Michelle, I'm interviewing you for my book.
It's fine. And, it's important to have these kind of conversations because, these things have been in our hearts for so long, and we haven't talked about it because every time we bring up race, people are, oh, you're bringing up race again. And when people say, oh, why don't Blacks do this? Or why don't they have more money? Or why are they not buying homes? You have to look at the content, the context, which is so important. But back to the aging thing, my takeaway point, which I love that I got from Maddy, was that we're not just talking about people in their 60s and 70s when we talk about ageless and, ageless aging. We're talking about the whole spectrum of age and redefining what it means to be at a certain age and where you should be or should not be.
If I could add, I'd say explore the magic of 4-generational fusion, right? I think to Michelle's point around how even our children, when they're grown, still need us and we need them and we need to learn from each other. And I think there's a magic of opportunity there. And I think our society has tended to become not just racially segregated, but also age segregated, right? So we send our kids off to college and then we send our older people to retirement places and we're separating. And I think the answer is actually to come back together in new ways.
I love that point about age segregation. I love that because I love it. It's a great way to look at that.
Yeah. Let me just add to that. I think that it's hard to talk about ageism right now with so many important things going on, but there is ageism. I mean, it's pervasive in our society, and we do tend to segregate the different ages, and it doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work for anybody. So that's a great lesson. Thank you, Dominic, for pointing that out.
So I'm going to bring up one more reader question, and I'll paraphrase it. And it's it plays off what you just said, Maddy, which is there was a time in your research and in your books that you talked about people cycling in and out of retirement, going back to school, taking a sabbatical, taking a vacation, taking whatever, and then going back into the workforce. Does that become more difficult in the COVID-19 era and in the era of ageism?
Well, the era of ageism has been going on since the 1950s. I mean, we've always been, youth is where the action is. Old people are over the hill. And it used to be that 50 was over the hill. So luckily it keeps moving out.
Not to interrupt, but when I was younger, I used to think that wisdom was wasted on the aged and that youth was wasted on the young now that I'm older.
Right.
Yeah, it's an irony. Let's put it that way. So ageism is real. We need to conquer it. The way we conquer it is by building bridges, I think, building bridges between the generations, as both Michelle and Dominic have pointed to. And I think that that's a really important thing that we need to do. And that we need to recognize also that there's a holistic nature of both health and finances, and they're very interconnected. And we can't forget that for a minute.
Right. And we see that now more than we've ever seen it before. Bob and I have to find the humor in things. So we've been scouring the net, just searching for inspiring photos or, stories of how people are doing dynamic activities in their older years. Here's a photo of some seniors doing something that I don't know if I'd want to do it, but take a look.
So, Pam, former President George H.W. Bush, he used to skydive to celebrate his birthday every 5 years, and his last jump before he died was in 2014 on his 90th birthday.
Well, that's the nice thing about getting older. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You can do whatever you want. Me, probably renting a moped in Bermuda would be about the high risk I'd get.
So now I'd like for us to discuss something Michelle has written quite a bit about, and that has to do with debt. We talked about it earlier. And curious, Michelle, if the pandemic will change our view of debt and how we use it.
I hope so. I am not a fan of debt. I always joke that if debt was a person, I'd slap it. And now I say that because as soon as I say that, they're intellectuals and economists and people are like, does this girl understand about leverage and and so forth? And I understand that many people can't afford a home without borrowing. But what I think I would like people to embrace is that the less debt we have, the more ability we have to weather storms, and the storms will always come. My grandmother used to say, you need a rainy day fund because it's always going to rain. And when it rains, you want to have an umbrella. And in my case, you don't want to have to be out in the open with debt. And so I do hope that when we learn lessons from these type of things, that people realize, like, for example, I am not going to retire with a mortgage. Absolutely will not. And if you don't have a mortgage right now in this economy, you are breathing and sleeping a lot better.
For me personally, and what I see around me and what I've tried to teach my kids is debt is the enemy. I mean, yeah, there are ways to leverage it and use it exciting, but I don't think the average American thinks that way or can think that way because they're just trying to keep themselves out of debt. And I think a lot of that comes from credit card debt. And I mean, take your credit cards, throw them away. You don't need them, especially right now when all you need is your phone and Apple Pay.
I totally agree about getting rid of debt. And I see the accumulation of global debt as a massive issue that is still hasn't really blown up, but it will. And I totally agree with Michelle. And I also think that a lot of the debt comes from the combination of, lame regulations that we're still living with, things that were laid down 80, 90 years ago that we need to re-examine, for example, around sort of zoning and housing construction, but also status seeking, right? Like we need the bigger house and the bigger car. And I think we need to sort of educate ourselves to say, well, actually, no, I need to retire with no mortgage.
I always like to say that for me personally, I look at it like it's good debt, bad debt. Good debt is anything that is going to fund an investment in your life. It's going to go up in value. Bad debt, I think of as anything that you eat or that you're going to throw away or clothing you're going to wear and it's going to be gone.
Drive.
Why would you be paying for that, 5 years after the fact?
I want you not to say that anymore. So good debt, bad debt. I want you to just take that out of your lexicon. So let me ask you this, the good debt, the mortgage, things that for assets that might appreciate. So when you go pay, do you have a mortgage, Pam?
Yes.
Okay. So when you go pay your mortgage, which would be in the good debt category, do you feel like joyful? Do you like skip to the bank? Yes, I'm so happy I can pay you. Because that's the definition of good, right? So I try to not say that at all because when we say that, it brings down people's barriers because they feel,
good point. Good point.
It's okay to have all this mortgage debt because this is good. So I never say there's good debt. There's no good debt or bad debt. There's only debt, which is
okay.
bad.
So why don't we say it this way? There's bad debt and then there's really bad debt. Because you're right. I'm not thrilled when I see the payment come out of my bank account every month. It doesn't, but so there's bad and then there's really bad. Bob?
Our words matter, what we tell ourselves.
Yes.
And in the finance, in the personal finance space, one of the things that you have to do is get people into a certain headspace so that they can make better decisions. So if I say all debt is bad, when you go to get the mortgage or the car loan, or maybe you think you have to borrow for school, you will have this feel like this weight on your shoulder. You're like, okay, I'm only going to put a 10-pound on my shoulder as opposed to two 20-pound weights. And that's why I try to get people to change their language around these things like debt and home ownership and all this kind of stuff. We have to do stuff because you have to be black and white, if I can use that term, on some things to get people to the middle.
I have hope for the future of our young Americans who are entering the workforce today or leaving college. In the case of my sons, all of them know their credit scores, and all of them know what needs to be done in order to improve their credit scores. Mm-hmm. In fact, they have even told me, for instance, that in some cases they can't make it any higher because they don't have a credit history long enough to impact the credit score. Right. So I can tell you at age 25, I just knew that I had a credit card and didn't know that there was a score attached to it. But, fast forward and my children know more about credit and debt than I ever did at the same age.
They also don't think home ownership is the be all end all the way my generation did.
They look at it differently. All right. So in Your Life, Your Money, as we mentioned, we're encouraging you, our viewers, to submit questions to pose to our experts. So here's one. My son's 27. He has student loan debt. He has a job, but no 401k, no employer-sponsored retirement plan. So here's the question. Is it better for him to pay down his debt really aggressively or pay the minimum and then save whatever he can and invest it in a Roth IRA? I want to direct this to Michelle because it's right in your wheelhouse, Michelle.
We already know the answer.
You all know the answer. Everybody's listening knows the answer. Pay off the debt, absolutely. Because when we talk about the end of retirement, we talk about the 20, 30 years. Well, this kid, this young adult, has decades to save for retirement. And what often happens is they carry that student loan debt, then maybe something happens, they put it on deferral, and then it builds up. So pay the debt off. They have time. And hopefully he can live at home or with a relative or with the 10 roommates he had in college so that more of the income is devoted to the debt and then can get out of debt quickly. So we're not talking about a decade. You could, if you throw all the money of it, we're talking a couple years. So absolutely, I would say wait on the retirement and get rid of that debt.
Michelle, what is so great about you is that you actually answer a question. You don't talk around it. You go right straight to it. So we always like to take a look at the lighter side of money. So I was perusing online the other day and came across a very interesting fact. Did you know that $1 bill weighs a gram and that 454 bills equal 1 pound? And then did you know that Americans have an average personal debt of about $90,460? So, Bob, I think it works out to about 200 pounds of debt that you're carrying.
Yeah. So, when I think about like losing weight, maybe I can start thinking about it in terms of how much debt I might be losing. If I lose 15 pounds, I haven't done the math yet, but I'm sure we can figure out how many dollars of debt that equals, right?
Brilliant. I'm on board with it. We're going to shift gears here a little bit. We've been hearing a lot that people are seriously contemplating, and they are moving out of, major cities, metro areas into the more bedroom communities. And partly that's in fear of, more virus in the densely populated areas, but also to the fact that people are, some people are getting used to working from home. So, Dominic, is this trend for real? And will it continue? Is it even really a true trend?
Yeah, I think this is a huge thing. And just as I said that there had been sort of a multi-century shift, and this was the third big shift, I think you're seeing effectively the reinvention of place. And you're seeing that in large cities and small cities and everything in between. And I think it's going to be both in the same way, wrenching for some, but a huge opportunity for a lot of places. And it's going to allow people to buy houses a lot cheaper. So for example, just in New York, if you move outside of New York City to Albany, you can already buy a house for like a fraction of the cost of being in the city. And you're still not that far away. And you can explore all these wonderful towns and cities. But at the same time, it's going to be hard because it's going to mean a lot of jobs are going to go where those people move. So there's the multiply effect, right? When you have, say, sort of a talented computer worker that moves to another place, over time you see the school jobs, the cafeteria jobs, the bar jobs start to follow them. So you're going to see a migration. But I think you're already seeing cities are reinventing themselves. Paris has now gone basically bike friendly for the first time in history. And it's becoming a marvelous place. You have about 100 cities in the US that are doing the same thing. Oakland is one to watch. And I think they're saying talent is going to go anywhere. I'm putting up my hand because I want them to come to Oakland. And that's the new attitude.
Yeah.
Something about Oakland, because I live 10 minutes from Oakland. Oakland is a very diverse city, and that's the beauty of the city. But because so many people from San Francisco, where it's a lot more expensive, have moved into Oakland, they're taking away the diversity in some ways. Sure, there's more talented tech workers moving in, but it's putting the Black community in jeopardy. And
absolutely.
And I don't blame them.
And if I could say, I think the big issue is production of housing. And we have forgotten as a society how to produce houses at a good cost. We used to be able to do it, and we can't do it anymore. But it can be rediscovered. If you actually look at the productivity of the construction and real estate industry, it's probably the only one that's gone down in the last 50 years. So we need to learn how to do that again.
I would never have even thought of that. That's a really interesting, startling point.
If I could just add one other thing, when we built the highways through the cities, they typically went through the communities that were diverse and that were poor. And they've created now massive amounts of pollution. They've also blocked economic development in those areas. And so we're still living with decisions that started in the 30s, 40s, 50s that have really fundamentally made our cities unhealthy. So it's both the zoning and also the construction of highways and the car-centric cities that we're fighting. And I think the new normal has to be rethinking all three of those things simultaneously. And I think that's going to be a critical thing for actually all of us as society coming back together again.
So I love the idea of spreading it around and not concentrating in the cities where cost is so much, particularly, it prices out so many people, especially minorities. So I'm all for it. I live in the suburbs. I'm encouraging my kids to live out here. I want them to be close by so I can help them out. And they're starting to buy into that. They're starting to sort of understand that having all that family together so that we can help each other, there's a huge benefit to that.
So we're not just all serious here. We like to look at the lighter side of money too. So Bob and I have been taking some time to really scrub down the internet and look for inspiring photos or stories of pets who are helping people adapt to their new geographic surroundings. So you've got to love this guy. Look at him. This is a dog who's figured out how to make a Zoom call. I think that's Zoom. Hello? Yeah. Uber treats? This is Fido. Drop off the 50 pounds of lamb treats at the back door. Let's talk about what it's going to be like to retire now. Think about it. Things are different now. They really are different. We've just been talking about this. Maddy, you've written about it. You've written about reinventing retirement in the new normal. So how's retirement going to be different now, or is it? Is it my imagination?
Yeah, well, in some ways it'll be different. In some ways, retirement will be exactly the same. But open up your dictionary, look up the definition of retirement, and you may be a little bit shocked. It says to withdraw, to go away, to disengage. I mean, I don't know anyone who wants to do that for 20 or 30 years. That is not what retirement is about anymore. At AgeWave, we've done studies, and what we've determined is two words really resonate with people thinking about retirement and people who are retired, and that is freedom and reinvention. Now, I after this conversation, I know the word reinvention is being way overused, but maybe it's reimagine. And as Dominic said earlier, maybe we need to take the word retirement and throw it out and come up with a new word, because
Here.
I love the idea of that. And I wish somebody would come up with a great word, because I would love to take that word on and use it in everything that I do. But the point is that it's a grassroots effort. What's happening is retirees And those thinking about retirement are the ones who are reimagining what retirement is. And one of the key points is that it used to be work or retirement. Now it's becoming work and retirement.
Yeah.
And it's just becoming part of what retirement is. Some people do it because they have to, but lots of people are doing it because they want to, and they don't want to work as hard as they did when they were younger. They don't want to put in 60, 70 hours a week, but they want to stay engaged.
At that point in life, as you said, maybe we've lost a few brain cells, but maybe we've gained perspective and wisdom. I want to see myself put this to work in ways that I wake up in the morning and relish for what I'm going to do every day.
Yeah, and sometimes the work is not for money. Sometimes it's doing something that you really care about. Maybe, as we talked earlier about changing the way the Black community embraces health, maybe it's getting involved on a grassroots level with that. I mean, there are so many things, we need resources, and the biggest resource we need is human resource. We need to get out there as we get older and make our world, I hate to sound trite, but a better place.
Yep. And maybe what we give up in terms of income that we could have if we kept on working harder where we were by enriching ourselves in other ways, like you just mentioned. I think that's a really thoughtful tip. Dom?
Yeah, I'd say I think to the point around status seeking, it's very easy to get caught in this more, and you don't feel any better, right? You just feel like you just acquired a bigger house or a bigger car or a boat, and it's not giving you that. I think the point is actually the way to get more and to be very selfish is to start to shift towards others, right? I think people have found that as you start to do that, guess what? It actually ends up fulfilling you. And I think that is a new message and a new way of thinking, and that's the opportunity.
For people who are lower income or middle income, they can't afford to retire. Although we know the studies show they end up having to retire because of health issues. So I would like to see more policies, first of all, to make sure that we don't have age discrimination in the workplace so that people can work longer if they're healthy enough and not be worried that they're going to be aged out of their jobs that they absolutely need. My husband and I, we can afford, because we're just great savers, to have a retirement where we don't have to work. But he and I want to do, nonprofit work. We spend a lot of time in financial literacy at our church, and we also volunteer at prisons to teach inmates who are about to be released how to handle their money. And we really want to grow that part of our volunteer work. We mostly work in just 1 or 2 prisons, but we'd like to work through more prisons throughout the state, but we can't do that with our day jobs. So that's how we are imagining our retirement. We spend, some time doing that. And then the rest of the time, I really do want to be on the beach, kicking back, looking at the ocean.
Yeah.
Me too.
Right. So I think about retirement in sort of 3 phases, right? There's the go-go, slow-go, and the no-go years. And obviously, we could all talk about the go-go and slow-go because we're healthy enough to do things and do work at nonprofits, et cetera. But in our no-go years, where the prospect of having to go into a nursing home exists, and going into a nursing home in the post-COVID-19 era, where we know 1 in every 4 deaths occurred in a nursing home because of COVID-19, what's the prospect there? Do we even think about that as an option or avoid it entirely?
I think, first of all, nursing homes are going to reconfigure. They're going to come up with a new model. There's no question about it. I mean, that's an industry that wants change. So these are well-meaning people, I think, at the heart, and they've made some mistakes and they want to fix it. However, very few older adults go into nursing homes, and I think we need to keep that in mind. And when you ask older people the way they want to live in the, as you call it, the no-go years, they want to be at home. They want to be aging and getting health care at home, and that's more affordable for one thing. They can be surrounded by family for another. And we need to, as Michelle suggested, change policy to make that an easier thing to do.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We have been to the future and back, and now we are just about out of time.
So when we think about the lighter side of your life and your money, one thing I keep thinking about is people keep saying they're going to work in retirement, but what will they do? Well, I was on the internet the other day and I came across 8 part-time jobs that retirees can do from home, according to the AARP. Those include bookkeeper, nurse, administrative assistant, paralegal, nanny, receptionist, customer service rep, and sales associate. I don't know about you, Pam, but that gives some folks some things to think about.
Well, I say add grandma to the list.
Isn't that an unpaid job, though?
for your grandkids, so their parents can work in the other room. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. So add grandparents to that list. And by the way, grandparents don't mind getting paid. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Your Life, Your Money.
Joining us will be nationally recognized personal finance journalist Gene Chatsky, Lee Baker, a financial planner from Atlanta, and Joe Coughlin, the director of the MIT AIDS Lab.
See you then.